Hey, so there's this moment. It doesn't look big from the outside, no fireworks, no soundtrack, no slow motion, just a simple question, will you go on a date with me? But if you really think about it, that question carries courage. It carries hope. It carries the risk of hearing no and the possibility of something that could change your whole world. Tonight, we're talking about that moment, the pause before you ask, the heartbeat that feels louder than usual, the way your hands might shake just a little because you care. Asking someone out isn't just about dinner or coffee. It's about vulnerability. It's about saying, I see you. I feel something. And I'm brave enough to admit it. And maybe that's where love really begins. Let's step into that space together, not the loud ones, not the ones dressed up in poetry or wrapped in perfect timing, just the honest ones, the ones that feel small when you rehearse them in your head, and enormous when they finally reach your lips. Will you go on a date with me? It sounds ordinary, almost casual, like something you could say without thinking. But the truth is, nobody says it without thinking. Nobody says it without feeling that subtle shift in their chest, that tightening, that awareness that something real is about to happen. Because when you ask someone that question, you are stepping forward without armor. You are saying, I see you. And seeing someone is not a small thing in a world that moves fast, where people scroll past faces and swipe past possibilities. Choosing to really see someone is an act of intention. It means you've been paying attention. The way they laugh when they forget to be careful. The way their eyes soften when they talk about something they love. The way they look away when they're shy but stay when it matters. You notice those things, and then one day they stop being details and start being reasons. And that's when the question begins to form. It doesn't arrive all at once. It builds quietly, in moments, in shared conversations that linger longer than they need to, in jokes that feel like they belong only to the two of you, in silence that doesn't feel awkward, just present. You start to wonder what it would be like to sit across from them intentionally, not as friends passing time, not as strangers filling space, but as two people choosing to explore something undefined. And that's when fear enters the room. Not loud fear, not dramatic fear, just the soft, persistent voice that says, what if they don't feel the same? Because asking someone on a date isn't just about coffee or dinner, it's about revelation. It's about stepping into the light and letting them see that you care more than you've been pretending to. There's no script for that moment, no guaranteed outcome. You can't control the answer. You can only control your honesty, and honesty is vulnerable. When you say, will you go on a date with me? You are offering something invisible but precious. You are offering your attention, your curiosity, your willingness to invest time. The one thing you can never get back. Time is sacred. We don't always treat it that way, but it is. So when you invite someone to share it with you, even for a single evening, you're saying, you matter enough for me to choose you. That choice carries weight. It says you're ready to step out of the safe territory of uncertainty and into the fragile space of possibility. It says you are willing to risk discomfort for connection. And that's brave. Bravery isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like steady eye contact. Sometimes it sounds like a voice that almost shakes but doesn't stop. Sometimes it's just the refusal to let fear make the decision for you. There's something deeply human about that moment before you ask. The seconds stretch. The world seems to narrow. Your mind runs through every possible outcome. The smile, the hesitation, the gentle decline. You imagine how you'll handle each one. You tell yourself you'll be fine either way, but beneath all of that preparation is hope. Hope that they'll smile. Hope that they've noticed you too. Hope that the connection you've been feeling hasn't been one-sided. Hope is a quiet thing. It doesn't demand. It doesn't force. It simply waits steady and patient for the chance to become real. And that's what makes the question so powerful. It's an invitation, not a not a transaction. An invitation, it says, would you like to discover something with me? There's humility in that. You're not claiming certainty. You're not promising forever. You're just opening a door, and opening a door requires trust. Trust in yourself that you can handle whatever answer comes. Trust in them that they will respond with kindness, even if the answer is no. Trust in the idea that connection is worth the risk. Some people wait for perfect timing. They wait for the stars to align, for the setting to feel cinematic, for a sign that guarantees success. But life doesn't move that way. Real moments are rarely polished. They're imperfect, unscripted, honest. Sometimes the question comes out a little awkward. Sometimes you stumble over the words. Sometimes you laugh nervously halfway through. But sincerity doesn't need perfection. In fact, it shines brighter without it. Because what the other person hears isn't just the sentence. They hear the intention behind it. EY feel the courage it took to say it, and whether they accept or decline, they understand that something genuine just happened. There's dignity in that. Even rejection, when handled with grace, doesn't erase the bravery of asking. It doesn't diminish the authenticity of the feeling. It simply means two stories aren't meant to intersect in that particular way, and that's okay because the act of asking changes you. It teaches you that you can survive vulnerability, that you can stand in uncertainty and remain steady, that your worth isn't determined by someone else's response, but when the answer is yes, there's a shift. It's subtle at first. A shared smile, a mutual recognition, an understanding that something new is about to unfold, not a guarantee of love, not a promise of permanence, just a beginning. Beginnings are sacred, they carry innocence, curiosity, a sense of exploration. You don't know where the road leads, you only know that you're willing to walk it together, at least FOR now. And it all started with a simple question, 14 words. Or sometimes fewer, will you go on a date with me? There's something almost poetic about how such a small sentence can hold so much emotion. It's proof that love doesn't always announce itself dramatically. Sometimes it starts quietly, with a voice that chooses honesty over fear. And maybe that's what makes it beautiful, not the grand gestures, not the flawless delivery, but the decision to step forward anyway, to let someone see that you care, to admit that their presence has started to matter in a way that feels different. When you ask that question, you are saying, I'm willing to be seen. And being seen is the beginning of everything real. It's easy to hide behind indifference, to pretend you're not interested, to protect yourself by never risking anything. But protection can become isolation, and isolation, over time, becomes loneliness. So you choose differently, you choose courage, you choose openness, you choose to let your voice carry what your heart has been holding. There's strength in that softness, a quiet strength that doesn't need applause, it only needs authenticity. And whether the answer is yes or no, you walk away knowing that you honored your feelings instead of silencing them, that you respected the connection enough to give it a chance, that you allowed hope to breathe, even if just for a moment. Because at the end of the day, love doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with a question. A question that trembles slightly in the air, waiting for its answer. The quiet vulnerability of risking rejection is something most people don't talk about honestly. We celebrate the yes. We romanticize the beginning. We replay the smiles and the laughter and the story of how it all started, but we rarely sit with the part that comes before all of that. The fragile space where you don't know what the answer will be. That space is where vulnerability lives. When you ask someone, will you go on a date with me? You are not just offering an invitation, you are exposing a feeling. You are revealing that their presence has moved something inside you. And once that feeling is spoken out loud, it can no longer hide behind casual conversation or friendly distance. It becomes real. And real things can be rejected. That's the part that makes your breath slow down before you speak. The awareness that you are handing someone a piece of your internal world and trusting them not to drop it carelessly. Rejection is not just about hearing the word no. It's about the meaning we attach to it. We fear it because we think it measures us. We fear it because we confuse someone's preference with our worth, but risking rejection is not weakness. It is one of the purest forms of strength. There is something profoundly human about wanting to be chosen, to be seen and met with equal energy. When you ask someone out, you are quietly saying, I hope you choose me too. And that hope can feel terrifying, because it places your heart in someone else's hands, even if only for a moment. The world teaches us to protect ourselves, to appear unbothered, to keep our feelings guarded until we are certain of the outcome. But certainty is an illusion. There is no guaranteed path in connection. There is only honesty, and honesty requires exposure. Exposure means standing in front of someone without armor, It means allowing your voice to carry something personal. It means accepting that you cannot control their response. You can only control your sincerity. There's a stillness in that moment before the answer comes, a quiet pause where time feels suspended. You notice everything, the shift in their expression, the flicker in their eyes, the way they inhale before they speak. It's in that pause that vulnerability feels loudest, because in that pause, you are completely open. It takes courage to remain steady there, to not rush to fill the silence, to not retract your words, to let them exist. Li in the air between you. Risking rejection also means respecting the other person's freedom. When you ask, you are offering a choice. You are not demanding reciprocation. You are not trying to persuade. You are simply saying, "This is how I feel. What do you feel?" That kind of openness is rare. Many people would rather protect their pride than risk their heart. They would rather live with what if than face a definitive answer. But what if can linger for years. It can replay in quiet moments. It can follow you into other connections, whispering about the chance you never took. Rejection, on the other hand, is immediate. It may sting, but it is clear. And clarity, even when it hurts, is cleaner than endless uncertainty. When someone says no, it doesn't erase your courage. It highlights it. It means you were brave enough to step forward knowing there was no guarantee. It means you valued truth over comfort. It means you believe that your feelings deserved expression, even if they were not returned. There is dignity in that. Vulnerability is often misunderstood as fragility, but it is not fragile to risk disappointment. It is strong. It requires emotional maturity to handle rejection without turning bitter. To hear no and still respect both yourself and the other person, because rejection is not a verdict on your value. It is a reflection of alignment. Two people can be kind, interesting, attractive, and still not be right for each other. That doesn't diminish either one. Understanding this changes the meaning of vulnerability. Instead of seeing it as a gamble where you might lose something, you begin to see it as an act of integrity. You are aligning your actions with your feelings. You are refusing to hide behind indifference. You are choosing authenticity over ego, and ego is often what resists rejection the most. Ego wants validation. It wants certainty. It wants to avoid discomfort at all costs. But growth does not live in comfort. Growth lives in the moments that stretch you, in the conversations that make your voice tremble slightly, in the questions that expose your hope. Risking rejection also builds resilience. The first time you put yourself out there, it feels overwhelming. Your heart races, your thoughts scatter. You imagine every possible negative outcome. But each time you survive vulnerability, you learn something powerful. You are capable of handling more than you think. You learn that embarrassment fades, that awkwardness passes, that the world doesn't collapse because someone didn't reciprocate your interest. And slowly, rejection loses its sharp edge. It becomes part of the process rather than a catastrophic event. It becomes information instead of condemnation. There is also compassion in vulnerability. When you risk rejection, you become more aware of how delicate it is to hold someone else's feelings. You understand the responsibility of responding with kindness. You realize how much grace matters in these moments, because you've felt the weight of the pause. You've felt the anticipation. You've stood in that open space, and that experience deepens you. It makes you more intentional, more empathetic, more grounded in your own emotional landscape. The quiet vulnerability of risking rejection teaches you about yourself. It reveals how attached you are to outcomes. It shows you where fear still lives. It challenges you to separate your identity from someone else's response. When you ask someone on a date, you are practicing emotional courage. You are proving to yourself that you don't need guaranteed approval to express interest, that your feelings are valid, even if they are not mirrored. That is powerful. There's something almost sacred about choosing honesty despite uncertainty. It means you are no longer negotiating with fear. You are no longer waiting for perfect conditions. You are acting in alignment with your heart, and alignment brings peace. Even if the answer is no, there is a strange calm that follows. A sense of relief that you didn't stay silent, that you didn't let the moment pass out of hesitation. You honored your truth. And honoring your truth builds confidence that no external validation can replicate. Because confidence isn't the absence of rejection, It's the willingness to face it. It's knowing that you can hear no and still stand tall, that you can feel disappointment without letting it harden you, that you can remain open even after being turned away. That kind of openness is rare, but it's also magnetic. People are drawn to those who are unafraid to be real, to those who can express interest without pressure, to those who understand that connection is mutual, not forced. Risking rejection keeps your heart flexible. It prevents you from becoming cynical. It reminds you that love, in any form, requires participation. You cannot experience deep connection while hiding behind walls. Walls may protect you from pain, but they also block possibility. So when you say, "Will you go on a date with me?" you are choosing possibility over protection. You are choosing expansion over safety. You are choosing to trust that whatever happens, you will remain whole. That trust changes everything. Because once you realize that rejection does not define you, vulnerability becomes less frightening. It becomes a doorway instead of a threat. And every time you walk through that doorway, you grow a little stronger, a little steadier, a little more comfortable with the truth of who you are and what you want. You begin to understand that risking rejection is not about chasing someone's approval. It's about honoring your own desire for connection. It's about saying, "I am willing to be seen." And in a world where so many people hide, that willingness alone sets you apart. It makes you brave in ways that don't require noise or spectacle. It makes you real. Hope lives in small spaces, not in the loud declarations, not in the dramatic promises of forever. It lives in the quiet seconds between a question and an answer. In the space between two heartbeats when you've just said, "Will you go on a date with me?" and the world seems to pause. That pause is fragile. It's invisible to everyone else, but to you it feels vast. Your senses sharpen. You notice the way they shift their weight, the way their eyes move, the almost imperceptible change in their breathing. And in that suspended moment, hope rises. Hope is not certainty. It doesn't demand guarantees. It simply leans forward gently and whispers, maybe. Maybe they felt it too. Maybe the way they lingered in conversation meant something. Maybe the smiles weren't accidental. Maybe the connection you imagined wasn't imagined at all. Hope is powerful because it allows you to believe in something that hasn't happened yet. It invites you to picture a future that is still undefined. A shared coffee, a walk after dinner, laughter over something small and unimportant that somehow feels significant because it's shared. But hope is also vulnerable. It requires imagination. And imagination requires openness. When you hope, you open yourself to the possibility of joy and the possibility of disappointment. You accept that the outcome is uncertain, but you still allow your heart to lean toward the light. There's courage in that leaning. Many people guard themselves by expecting nothing. They tell themselves it's safer that way. If you assume rejection, you can't be surprised by it. If you suppress hope, you can't be let down. But a life without hope is not protected. It's diminished. Hope is what gives meaning to the question. Without hope, will you go on a date with me? Would just be a logistical inquiry, a calendar check. But with hope, it becomes an offering. It becomes a bridge between two separate inner worlds. In that space between heartbeats, you are imagining what it would feel like if they said yes. You imagine the relief. You imagine the shared understanding. You imagine the quiet excitement of knowing something new is beginning. Beginnings are fueled by hope. They are sustained by the belief that something beautiful could grow from something small. Hope doesn't need grand gestures. It survives on subtle signals. A smile that lingers a second longer. A message sent just to check in. The way your name sounds different when they say it. These details become seeds, and hope waters them. But hope is not blind. It doesn't ignore reality. It simply chooses to see possibility within it. It acknowledges uncertainty, but refuses to let uncertainty dictate the outcome before it arrives. In love, hope is the spark before the flame. It is the quiet belief that connection is possible in a world that often feels disconnected. It is the willingness to imagine yourself beside someone, sharing time, sharing stories, sharing silence. Silence is important. When you're waiting for an answer, silence stretches. It can feel heavy. But within that silence, hope steadies you. It reminds you why you asked in the first place. It reminds you that the risk was worth taking because the potential mattered to you. Hope is deeply personal. No one else can measure it. No one else can fully see it. It lives inside your chest, alongside the nerves and the anticipation. It's what keeps your gaze steady instead of dropping to the floor. It's what keeps your voice soft instead of apologetic. Because when you hope, you are not begging for an outcome. You are believing in a possibility. There's dignity in hopeful love. It's not desperate. It's not demanding. It's patient. It understands that the other person has their own feelings, their own fears, and timing. Hope respects that. It says, I would like this, and I am open to what is true. That openness transforms the question into something beautiful. It removes pressure and replaces it with sincerity. It allows the other person to respond freely, without feeling cornered. Hope creates space, and space is where authentic connection grows between two heartbeats. There is also trust. Trust that whatever answer comes will be honest. Trust that you can handle it. Trust that hope itself is not foolish, even if the outcome isn't what you wished for, because hope is not about controlling the result. It's about honoring your desire for connection. Desire is not weakness. It is part of being alive. To want someone's company, to want to know them more deeply, to want to explore what might unfold, that is human. Hope allows you to embrace that humanity. It softens the sharp edges of fear. It balances the weight of vulnerability. It gives you something steady to hold on to while everything else feels uncertain. When someone says yes, hope transforms into momentum. It shifts from possibility to reality. The imagined coffee becomes a planned evening. The hypothetical laughter becomes something you can almost hear. And in that transformation, hope proves its quiet strength. But even if the answer is no, hope is not wasted, because hope is not only about this one person. It is about your capacity to believe in connection at all. It is about your willingness to see potential in others and in yourself. Each time you allow yourself to hope, you keep your heart flexible. You prevent it from becoming rigid with cynicism. You remind yourself that love, in any form, begins with openness. There is something deeply moving about that, to stand in front of someone and ask a question that carries your hope inside it, to let them see that you are willing to imagine something shared, to let them know that you believe there could be something worth exploring. That belief is gentle, but it is strong. It takes strength to hope in a world that sometimes feels indifferent. It takes resilience to keep imagining connection after disappointment. But without hope, love would never begin. Hope is the invisible thread that ties courage and vulnerability together. Courage allows you to ask. Vulnerability allows you to mean it. Hope allows you to believe it could lead somewhere meaningful. Between two heartbeats, everything is possible. The story has not yet been written. The answer has not yet been spoken. In that suspended second, the future feels open, unwritten, alive, and you stand there, steady breathing, aware of the weight and the beauty of what you've just offered. That's where hope lives, not in guarantees, not in promises, but in the quiet, trembling space where you choose to believe that something beautiful might begin. The beginning of something real rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive with certainty. It doesn't come with a clear map of where it's going. It starts quietly, almost unnoticed, in the aftermath of a simple yes, yes, I'd like that. And suddenly the air feels different, not because everything has changed, but because something has shifted. A door that was once closed is now slightly open. A possibility that lived only in your imagination has stepped into reality. That's how something real begins, not with guarantees, not with forever, but with mutual willingness. When someone says yes to your invitation, they're not promising you a future. They're offering you a moment, a shared step forward, a decision to explore what might exist between you. An exploration is honest. It doesn't pretend to know the ending. It doesn't rush ahead to define everything. It simply says, let's see. There's humility in that, a grounded understanding that connection isn't built in grand declarations. It's built in time, in presence, in attention. The beginning of something real feels subtle at first. It might just be a date on a calendar, a place and time agreed upon. But beneath those logistics is something deeper. Intention. You are no longer wandering alone. You are no longer carrying the possibility by yourself. Now, it's shared. That sharing changes the energy. Conversations feel slightly charged. There's an awareness now, a gentle acknowledgement that this isn't random. You're choosing each other, even if just for one evening. Choice is powerful. In a world full of distractions and endless options, choosing someone, even temporarily, is meaningful. It says, out of all the noise, I'm focusing here. And focus creates intimacy. When something real begins, it doesn't rush. It doesn't try to impress with perfection. It allows space for authenticity, for small imperfections, for natural pauses in conversation, for laughter that isn't rehearsed. Reality isn't polished. It's textured. You notice the way they think before answering certain questions, the way they gesture when they're excited, the stories they tell about their past. You start to see not just the version of them you imagined, but the person who actually exists. And that's important because something real can only grow between two real people, not projections, not fantasies, not idealized versions crafted from hope alone. The beginning is where illusion slowly gives way to understanding. You learn what makes them light up. You notice what makes them quiet. You begin to recognize patterns in their thoughts, rhythms in their speech, and they begin to see yours. There's vulnerability in that mutual discovery. You're both stepping slightly outside your comfort zones, revealing preferences, admitting quirks, sharing pieces of your lives that aren't visible on the surface. And with each shared detail, something roots itself more firmly in reality. The beginning of something real is also fragile, not weak, but delicate. It requires care. It requires presence. It requires patience. You can't force depth. You can't demand chemistry. You can only nurture what naturally unfolds. And nurturing requires listening. It means being fully there when they speak. Not planning your next line. Not performing. Just listening. Absorbing, responding honestly. That kind of presence is rare, but it's what transforms a simple date into something meaningful. It's what turns small talk into connection. It's what allows two separate lives to intersect without losing their individuality. Because something real doesn't consume you. It complements you. At the beginning, there's also uncertainty. You don't know where this will go. You don't know if it will last. But instead of letting that uncertainty create anxiety, you let it create openness. You allow yourself to experience what's in front of you without rushing ahead. That's maturity. Something real doesn't need to be rushed toward a label. It doesn't need immediate definition. It needs space to breathe. The first shared meal. The first long walk. The first time you both lose track of time in conversation. These moments aren't dramatic, but they're foundational. They're bricks in something that might become solid. And even if it doesn't, they're still real. There's beauty in beginnings because they are honest. No history of conflict. No accumulated misunderstandings. Just two people showing up with curiosity. Curiosity keeps things alive. It invites questions. It encourages exploration. It allows you to see the other person as evolving rather than fixed. At the beginning, you're both slightly more attentive, slightly more aware. There's a softness in how you treat at each other, a respect for the newness of it all. That softness is not weakness. It's care. Care is what separates something casual from something real. It's the willingness to consider how your words land, the instinct to check in, the decision to be clear rather than vague. Clarity builds trust. And trust is the foundation of anything real. When you begin something authentic, you're not just hoping for romance. You're building mutual understanding. You're learning how to exist beside each other. Comfortably. Comfort is underrated. It's easy to be excited at the beginning. Adrenaline carries you through. But comfort, the ability to sit in silence without tension, to be yourself without editing, that's what signals depth, and depth takes time. The beginning is just the first layer. But it matters, because how something starts often shapes how it grows. If it begins with honesty, it has a stable base. If it begins with respect, it has balance. If it begins with genuine interest, it has energy. Something real isn't about intensity alone. Intensity can fade. What remains is consistency. The small, repeated acts of showing up, the follow-up message, the kept promise, the remembered detail. These things might seem minor, but they accumulate. They create a sense of reliability. And reliability is attractive in a quiet, enduring way. At the beginning, you're planting seeds. You may not see the outcome yet. You don't know if they'll grow into something lasting, but you plant them anyway. Because something real is always a risk. It requires time, it requires emotional investment, it requires the willingness to see and be seen repeatedly. And yet, despite the risk, you step forward because the alternative, never beginning at all, feels emptier. There's a certain peace in knowing you allowed something to start, that you didn't let fear prevent exploration, that you give connection a chance to exist in tangible form. Even if the path changes later, the beginning remains. Meaningful. It represents courage meeting opportunity. It represents two people deciding, even briefly, to walk side by side instead of separately. And that decision, simple, quiet, mutual, is where something real takes its first breath. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. Alive in its uncertainty, grounded in its honesty, growing with each shared moment that follows.